Hey, everyone, and welcome to episode 287 of Milwaukee's Tailgate Brewers podcast, part of the MKE Tailgate Network. I am James, joined by Ryan, and stepping in for Paul this week. Should I do the intro in suburban Wauwatosa?
Yeah, I believe it's Urban Wauwatosa. I think that's where we stand on it.
Damn it! I screwed that up.
I don't know. I don't know. That's Paul's thing, but yes, it's hello. J.R. Radcliffe is my name. If you listen to Reporting is Eligible, you've heard my voice before. And I work for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, covering the trending sports reporter, covering all sorts of sports things. So little Packers, little Brewers, little Bucks or Badgers, if that's your thing. But we'll narrow focus on that today.
Absolutely. Thanks for stepping in. I know the internet's been spotty for you historically.
Always spotty. This house is a mausoleum. I don't know what to do about it right now. I've tried everything. I have tried everything. So we're just gonna have to hope for the best.
And if it's just me and Ryan talking at each other for a long time, you could probably just assume that JR's internet died, and we'll try to get him back.
I do enjoy listening back to podcasts I'm on, having no idea what we talked about, and it's kind of pleasant. It's like, oh, good, my point fit right into what people were saying, and I didn't overlap because I didn't hear them. It's always an adventure, but I think we're good. I think we're good right now.
Yeah, fingers crossed. We've been talking a solid 10 or 15 minutes here. So although with our luck with the tech stuff, it'll crap out right in the middle of a sentence. So let's just dive right in. Make the most of your good internet right now.
Time we have.
Yes. Before we get started, lots of questions this week on Patreon. You can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. $2 a month gets you question priority both on this podcast and on Reporting as Eligible with JR and Paul. $5 gets you question priority plus the additional exclusive content, including a minor league extra with Ryan and James Anderson that dropped in the last week. Ryan, what did you guys talk about this go around?
Well, we mostly did a are you worried or are you not worried about some specific things about some of the top prospects. Because last month we did a whole guys who are off the radar and are kind of emerging thing, but we barely talked about the top guys. So we decided to kind of reverse course, and we really focused in on the big boys and spent a lot of time talking about them and what they've done so far and what some weaknesses might be and how much they concern us. So that was the main focus of the episode. And of course, also got some questions about some new guys to pay attention to, and always nice to get that. And then also a little dynasty baseball talk. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Awesome. So like I said, be sure to check that out. Patreon.com/MKE Tailgate. $5 a month gets you access to that podcast every month, as well as Paul's Reporting as Eligible mini pods during the Packers season. All right, so talking Brewers, JR, I know you've talked plenty of Brewers already with Kurt, but we'll do it again here. As we record this on Sunday night, Brewers have won 3 games in a row in Cincinnati. I guess it's just the second time since the start of May they've won that many games in a row, which kind of tells you how the last month or two has been going. But despite that mini winning streak there, they still only have a half game lead over the Pirates because the Pirates are on a 5-game winning streak. So not really gaining any ground here, but the schedule is kind of lightening up a little bit at just the right time for the Brewers, especially considering the injury situation. I know others have noted that literally everybody on the 40-man roster is either hurt or on the 25-man right now. So plenty of injuries to go around. I guess there is some good news. Adam McCalvey saying that, in the next week, we should see Willy Adames back. I saw he was slated for a rehab assignment coming up here. Luis Urias should be back in the next week or so. Wade Miley and Eric Lauer getting rehab starts, so they're on the road to recovery there as well. But we've talked about this for quite a long time, the amount of injuries the Brewers have had. And yes, every team is super injured this year, but this seems like a lot, and the Brewers are still kind of chugging along here. So we actually got a lot of questions about the injury situation, so we'll just jump right in. We'll start with Jay Google on Patreon asking, at what point is too many injuries too many? With all the injuries are we expecting the young guys to hit a wall sooner? With Urias due back, as he slid back to third base and Anderson to right field, or will it need Terang on the bench, or maybe even center field fill in as well? So Jay has a lot of questions. JR, let's just start with how many injuries are too many? Have we hit that point yet?
I do think this is the week we cross that threshold from they have the same amount of injuries as a lot of teams to holy smokes, they have a ton of injuries. And I still would maintain that outside of, I mean, Willy Adames fits this category as well, but I guess we wouldn't necessarily expect his injury to be a long-term thing. Brandon Woodruff is the only guy in my mind that is a true full-fledged difference maker that they're missing. So I've always felt like they could get through it. It's just a bodies problem now. You're getting starting pitchers that no one could have possibly imagined would be part of the equation. Well, Julio Teheran wasn't even in the organization 3 weeks ago, so 2 weeks ago. So Colin Ray, like, these are guys that you would never have counted on, guys in the bullpen as well. So that's an issue. I think you're probably at a point where they are going to turn a corner, because I guess the thing with Urias is, given that he's only played in one game, is he going to be hitting well right out of the gate? Probably not. He struggled at the start of his rehab assignment, has kind of rounded into form lately, but I don't know if you can expect him to just jump in and be like a power hitting third baseman right away. So that's an issue. What is Willy Adames? How is he going to bounce back from this? There's still an uncertain timetable around him, and Wade Miley's ahead of schedule, but he's still, 2 weeks away from his next start. So they are still going to be in a tread water phase, I think, to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
But if they can get Urias and Adames back, that's big. And I do think to answer Jay's question, I think Terang's going to end up going back to AAA, and these things often work out where another injury pops up and it doesn't end up being the case. But with those guys, and I never thought I'd say this because I didn't even really know the name Andrew Monasterio a couple weeks ago. If I'm telling on myself a little bit, that was not a name that I had really even spent much thought on. Him being effective as an infielder, and obviously with the bat, gives you flexibility. With Terang in a huge offensive hole, he's good defensively, very good defensively, but I wouldn't say he's otherworldly to justify like a 1 for 35 slump or whatever he was in. So I could see him going back a little bit, kind of rediscovering his swing a little bit or whatever's bothering him, and that might be kind of the thing that the doctor ordered for him. I could see that being a big, I could see that being a big boost for him.
Yeah, I was really disappointed when that ball that definitely went over first base wasn't called a fair ball today, because it was like, oh, a double would have really helped him out. And then he stung the ball a couple pitches later, and it ended up being on the warning track. And so just, not getting out. And it was like, yeah, he really needs something to break out of this slump that he's in. And that seemed like it might be a thing. And then it went away. I'm not sure. I don't want to get too much into it because we're going to talk more about Monasterio later, but yeah, I mean, I saw him play the end of some games in spring training, but other than that, it's like he's completely new to me, and I never paid any attention to him before that. So I think that you have to keep your expectations limited on guys like him and other guys as well. I mean, we have a whole bunch of guys right now that are doing things that you wouldn't necessarily expect them to do, from Owen Miller on down to Colin Ray and Monasterio. So a bunch of guys are kind of performing what would seem to be over their heads. So you ride it as long as you can, and as long as you need to, and then hopefully you have these other guys coming back and they can step in. Like, that's a big part of this here, right? Is you do have bodies coming back, and I think that it's a good shout. I think Urias and Adames slide right back in, and they probably come back relatively, but we think Urias is going to be back Tuesday, right? When they begin the homestand. Yes. And then Adames is slated to he did a day in AAA today, and then he's supposed to he did a day in Wisconsin today, and then he's supposed to see if he feels okay, and then he's going to do a couple in AAA, and then potentially be back up for like later in the week. That's the general timeline there, right? So I think that if that does come to fruition, that's going to force them obviously to make, well, I would think that it would be fairly, well, wait a second. Monasterio probably does go down in that case if they both come back, right? It's got to be Monasterio, and because even like, who else is even left at this point? It's hard it's so hard to keep track of what the roster is these days, because they're making so many changes on a day in, day out basis that, like, who is even out there? But yeah, I think you're going to see Urias playing both second base and third base would be the answer. I think you're going to continue to see Anderson in right field and at third base. I think both of those things will continue to be true. And really the only everyday player on this roster, well, besides Christian Yelich, I guess, is Adames. Adames is the everyday shortstop. Everybody else, him and Yelich, everybody else is kind of subject to either moving around or being in and out of the lineup based on platoons, because even Rowdy is off and out of the lineup against lefties. So
I think Weimer's pretty regular in center
Oh,
field.
that's a good point. You're right. Weimer is actually the third guy there, and there's another question about what do you anticipate with him going forward, because I guess he's been a little bit better. He's not in a slump the way Terang is, but his overall performance has not been very good at the plate, and it's the defense that's really propping him up and making him sort of a viable big leaguer at this point, right?
He had a really good week. Weimer did offensively. So in addition to his defense, I think you could maybe dream on this past week as just a really good sign for him.
As turning the corner, hopefully.
Yeah. And I mean, like going back to Terang instead of Monasterio, Owen Miller is still hot. He's probably second base if Urias is a third base, or flip him. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
If Urias is going to play every day, Adames is back at short. They're not going to have Terang be a bench player. That's not why he's here yet. So if Monasterio, meanwhile, could be that bench player. So that's why I would suspect that it's Terang and not Monasterio who goes down. It could easily be Monasterio, and maybe we don't even know how he came out completely health-wise on Sunday after he took a punch on the base pads. So like maybe he goes on the IL for all we know. It didn't seem that's where it's headed, but who knows? So a lot can happen between now and even the few days from now when Willy Adames is scheduled back. But that was just kind of what I was thinking.
Right. And on the topic of Andrew Monasterio, we do have a question from Jason Spitz about him, asking, is there any reason to believe Monasterio is an undiscovered, legit major league player, or should we just enjoy this until it inevitably ends? So, he's kind of been a career journeyman, bouncing around a little bit, was a throw-in in a couple of trades earlier in his career, Daniel Murphy trade, Yan Gomes, but signed as a minor league free agent with the Brewers and has kind of just bounced around, been that utility guy in the minors, Ryan, right? So I don't know if you really expect him to do much of anything. You kind of just take these couple of weeks and run with it, right? It's a good story for sure.
Yeah, it's a good story, and he is putting up really good numbers. With today's numbers, he's hitting .412 with a .474 on base and a .647 slug because of that home run. Like the numbers are good, but you're talking about 19 plate appearances, and you have a long track record of him being, I guess he was putting up a 115 WRC plus, so 15% above league average at AAA this year as a 26-year-old. But then you kind of look back and, I guess last year, 149 at AA. There might be something more here. I'm looking, and he's actually consistently above the league average in terms of offense. So, I'm talking myself into this, and that's dangerous.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
So
he's 26. Come on.
He's 26.
I looked into this too, Ryan, and the exact same thing. Like, often you hear about how difficult it is for players from Latin countries coming to the United States as teenagers, which is what happened to this guy. He's from Venezuela. First few years in his minor league career wasn't special, but he was 17, 18, 19. You can see the progression in those minor league numbers. He's improved dramatically once he gets to AA and AAA. His numbers are solid. And obviously, like anyone, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that was an everyday major leaguer that they just happened to be sitting on, because this is his second year in the Brewers organization. I mean, obviously he would have been here already. This team has gone through players, like mad. He would have been here already if they truly believed he was an everyday starting major leaguer, but he is 26 years old. He can play multiple positions and seemingly play them well. So I don't know what they have, but I do think I think there's a possibility that is a major leaguer and that he could be here for a while.
Yeah, the more I look at this, the strikeout rate was higher in his career at some points. So the end of his career with Cleveland in 2019 to 2021, it was on the high side. But ever since he got to Milwaukee, it's been in the teens for the most part, other than, a 25.7 in 250 plate appearances at AAA last year. He's actually not striking out that much, and that... Man, I didn't want to talk myself into this, and now all of a sudden I've talked myself into it. This is bad. I mean, don't go expecting anything from Andrew Monasterio. I think it's best to just keep those expectations low. But yeah, he might be a big league utility guy. You might be right. He might be a guy that has a career bouncing around for a while. And certainly, if you want to ride a hot streak, ride a hot streak. And the thing is, how much do you really want to count on the hot streak being there? I guess it would be Mike Berceau who would go down, right? Like it would be Berceau and Terang if you're going to send guys out to get Adames and Urias back up here, and then start.
No, Toro will go first. Abraham Toro
Yes,
before
Toro's still
anybody.
there.
Oh, is Toro still up there? He hasn't been in the lineup in a few days here. I figured he had been sent
has
out.
not.
Huh. Okay.
He is still there. He will be the first guy to go, and then the question mark is the second guy.
Yeah, I mean,
And the 40-man move for Urias to come back off the
Urias, yeah.
60 is a little bit of a mystery. I think there's pathways to do it, but there isn't an obvious one.
yeah, that is a little tricky because, like you said, the 40-man is just sort of locked in there. It's very, very tight.
Someone's going to get moved to the 60 for 60-day IL, or someone gets DFA'd. A reliever.
A reliever's
They'll
gonna
figure it
DFA for
out.
Sure. Yeah.
Woodruff's already on the 60, right? Yeah, he is.
Yes.
That's
Okay.
correct.
Yeah.
Yep. Mitchell, Woodruff, and Urias are all there.
Okay. Yeah.
And Ashby.
What a this is just insane. The number of injuries that they've dealt with is just and like weird injuries. Your partner at the Journal Sentinel pointed this out. In the last week, they have had a player get hit by a foul ball while in the dugout. They have had a player run into a
Tarp.
and get his knee
his knee open.
sliced open, yeah. And then a guy get basically punched in the face while trying to tag somebody out today. And
throw in the fact that we're talking about muscles no one's heard of before, the scapularis and the Cicero. I don't even know what they are. I don't remember. But like, what is going on here?
Yeah, that Brewers 2023. What is going on here?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, I guess. Yeah. On that note, Mark Podscarby has a question here on the number of players the Brewers have used so far, asking how long until they pass last year's record of 53 players to play in a season. I just pulled up the baseball reference page. It's the first week of June, and they've used 44 players, JR. It's
45.
insane.
Well,
45.
44. Now, yeah. 44 and 45 if you count JB Bukowskis, who is, of course, on the injured list, having never played for the Milwaukee Brewers this season.
Okay. That's right.
So, yeah, I actually tried this exercise. Could I name all 45 players? I did this earlier today. I got to 39. I ended up getting to like 42, but I really had to dig deep. And then, shouts to Jansen Junk. I'm sorry, man. Javier Guerra. I really feel like I should have remembered you guys, but I don't even remember who the third one was that I was. Wasn't Gus. I had Gus very early on, but
Alex Claudio made a brief.
Alex Claudio. That's exactly Alex Claudio. Shouts to you. Also, someone I could not come up with without checking. It is crazy. I have a feeling it's going to slow down because they're going to be getting more guys back. Well, I knock on wood. I shouldn't give them any ideas, but they're probably going to be getting guys back more at a more rapid rate than they can lose them. Although, yeah, like I said, shouldn't put that in the ether.
Challenge the universe there. Yeah.
I do think it's. I mean, Keston Hiura and Sal Frelick, when they get healthy, are probably going to get a chance to play with this team at some point. So there's two right off the bat. They're going to need more bullpen arms at some point. They're going to trade for them. So like, there's already baked in obvious roster additions in the future here.
Mm-hmm.
I do think they'll easily bypass this number from last year. It'll probably be in like late June or something, but it's been a tough time.
Yeah. Robert Gosser too, I think is pretty likely to see time this year at some point. And yeah, it's just insane. I don't really know what to say beyond that. It's just, this is the damnedest season we've had because the injuries have just been something I've never really seen this before.
Tom Haight on Patreon has a similar thought. He's asking, I don't get to watch as often as I'd like anymore, but every time I watch, there are several guys I've never heard of playing. With all the injuries, is it a miracle we are still in contention, even in this miserable division? JR, what do you think?
I do think it is a little bit of a miracle, but like it's not as the division gives them that position for sure. But they're still, 5 games over 500 against not divisional foes. This is the balanced schedule, and they've beaten the teams in front of them. I mean, Cincinnati is a whipping boy, but they were red hot coming into this series, and it easily could have fallen the other way for Milwaukee in each of the first 2 games. So they have had. It's been a little weird because I think this has been discussed. The Devin Williams usage actually kind of ramped up a little bit this week, but it just hasn't been close games. It's been like blowouts either way and just kind of some weird stuff. So it hasn't felt like they've missed a ton of opportunities nor taken advantage, stolen opportunities either, stolen games away. Although now they have played in a few close ones. So they're a winning team. Like I don't think they're great, but that's just as currently constructed. They get everybody back and everybody healthy and good healthy. Then they're a team that should win this division. I think the real question isn't even it's them or St. Louis still in my mind. Even though St. Louis just had a miserable weekend, lost to Pittsburgh, it is very difficult to get a handle on whether or not Pittsburgh is truly for real. We're past Memorial Day, and they're still they've been here all year, so you have to give them some credit. I still can't imagine they're much more than a slightly above 500 team, which actually might be enough in this division. But I also refuse to believe the Cardinals are just that bad. And maybe that's just history talking. But if you can get them 2 more months of mediocre play and they start selling at the deadline, that's huge. That's huge for Milwaukee. So it is as frustrating as it has been this season. You cannot deny that they are sitting in a pretty decent spot. You have to feel good about that.
Well, beyond the injuries, which we've belabored to death, look at the roster up and down and look at how many players who are important and how many of them are performing at the level that you would expect. I guess you could say Rowdy is, and I guess Yelich is not super far off of sort of what his established level the last few years is. I think a little bit lower than that, but like he's not really performing way underneath. But if you start looking at other guys, Jesse Winker's over here with a 56 OPS plus. You've got Tyrone Taylor with a 15. You've got Willy Adames, 86. You've got, Terang well below. I mean, 56. I don't know if you can even, 52. I don't know if you can even say for sure what you expect out of him, but look at those guys and then go over to the pitching side and look at Corbin Burns and Freddie Peralta. Neither of those guys has been on balance what you expect out of them. And you go, oh, they've somehow managed to be as good as they have been. They're 5 games over 500 right now? Is that where we're at?
Yeah.
5 games over 500 with a cataclysmic amount of injuries and a lot of underperformances from their most important players. And they're 5 games over 500. And that makes me go, wow, as they start to get guys back, and some of these people are going to start to rebound, right? Some of them have to start playing better than what they have been. Is this secretly like a really, really good team that's been sort of hidden under just this pile of injuries and underperformances, and that we're actually going to see them come out and really fire in the second half, or say, after the All-Star break? I don't know. Like it almost seems like it really could go that way, because they just seem to have like a lot of potential energy stored up with all these guys who've underperformed. Like Corbin Burns isn't this bad, is he? Freddie Peralta isn't this bad. And so I just look at that and go, I think they might actually have some running room to be really good. You just have to hope that they can get reasonably healthy, right? Like that's the biggest thing. You get reasonably healthy and some of these guys start to turn it around, and maybe you actually go on a real run and they're not a team where you're going, oh, we're hoping to win the division with 86 or 87 wins. Maybe they can get into the 90s and actually be a truly good team. But we'll just have to see. I mean, they are getting over performances from some guys too. I shouldn't poo-poo the idea that Adrian Hauser isn't going to pitch like this all year. He's been nails for them when they really, really needed it. He's saved their bacon now multiple days. So yeah. And even when he was bad, you pointed out, JR, on Twitter, even when Adrian Hauser was bad this week against the Jays, it was weirdly bad. Like he was just giving up a lot of ground balls that got through.
Right. Such is life as a ground ball pitcher too. I think too, as other people have pointed out, the balanced schedule, they can't just beat up on the dregs of the division anymore. But I think it's worth noting that baseball as a whole, outside of the AL East, is all sort of meh this year. So it's not like there's a lot of teams separating themselves. The Braves are in first place in the East with 35 wins, and the Brewers have 32. It's literally a 3-game difference between those two. Mm-hmm. I think you're seeing a lot of congregation around the middle this year, which I know other podcasts like Effectively Wild have talked about. Hey, it's nice that it's basically just the A's and maybe the Royals that are terrible this year, but it's leading to everybody kind of meeting in the middle. It's hard to predict what's going to happen here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like real quick that Burns, Peralta, and then Woodruff's health, that's something that has to be there for them, not even just to get to the playoffs, but to be a legitimate threat in the playoffs. And I know, the small sample of the playoffs, it could be seven nobodies and it would get done, who knows. But I feel like you need that to improve, because that's a difference making situation. That's what separates the Brewers from a lot of teams. Their defense separates them from a lot of teams, and getting those three guys back at full capacity also does. I think Corbin Burns has been kind of just okay, for better than okay, but not his dominant self for a calendar year now. Like going back really the middle of last year, he's like a 3.76 ERA, which is fine. You would love that out of most people in your rotation, but that's not top of the line difference maker type stuff. Peralta's been really uneven this year. Woodruff obviously has had a few like weird health things, and if you get those guys back, we're talking about a really good team. Absent that, I am still unconvinced that we're talking about a really good team. I think we're talking about a team that's above average enough to get to the playoffs, but maybe that's a best case scenario.
All right. Next up, we have a pair of questions from Luke Roy's Suitcase, who is asking, of the recently called up hitters who no one was talking about before the season, who has the best chance of staying up for an extended period of time, i.e. Monasterio, Perkins, Singleton? Ryan, I know we kind of talked about this, maybe Monasterio as you talk yourself into it, but maybe is there a spot for John Singleton as like a DH if they get rid of Winker and Voigt's out and in all those? I don't know. Is there an opening there?
There might be a little bit of an opening for Singleton. You're right about if Winker just doesn't ever start to hit for power, and I don't know how much longer the leash is going to be there. But if Winker just never hits for power, maybe there is some room for Singleton there. But I think Monasterio is probably the one. Toro is an interesting one too, because he also has defensive versatility. So sure. I think you can kind of take that into account there. But Monasterio seems to have, Jared's talked me into this idea that like Bryce Turang probably goes down and gets a chance to just like hit against AAA pitching again for a while and maybe start to get that confidence going again. So I think Monasterio of this group, and Perkins is he's filler, like pure and simple filler. The fact that he was bunting, I still haven't gotten over the bunting from in that Angels series.
He had a grand slam this week, man.
I know a grand slam is just a home run that knows somebody, but like, yes, he did actually show some legitimate power. But the fact that he was bunting in those situations against the Angels, I'm just like, either the team has zero confidence in your ability to hit, or you have zero confidence in your ability to hit, and either of those things is terrible. And so I'm just like, I'm out on Perkins, but. Yeah,
I am willing to give him a little bit of a leeway on the second visit. The first visit to the big leagues, he was unplayable. That was not good. Now he got really hot in AAA. He comes up, he's swinging a little bit of a better bat. They obviously need him defensively right now. They're short on guys, so I am willing to try again. Like second impression, and maybe we go a different direction. But I agree with you. The first impression was quite bad, and I'm sure if they had their druthers, they wouldn't be relying on Blake Perkins just yet. But there's at least a window where he can be here a little bit longer.
And to be fair, they did give him that major league contract in the offseason, which shows that they really think a lot of him. You don't just hand out a major league contract to a guy who's never played in the majors. Like, I don't think he made his debut with the Brewers, right? So he had never played in the majors before, and you don't give a major league contract to a guy like that as a minor league free agent unless you really, really believe in them. But then again, he may just be the guy that they have to get rid of to make one of these other roster moves when the time comes. So who knows? We'll see. But yes, that grand slam was a huge, big deal. I literally like yelled out, and I was sitting and watching in my garage, and I yelled out, and I think like scared the neighbors that I was like, basically, yeah, you gotta be kidding me. And I didn't just say, you gotta be kidding me. I was quite astounded at that.
I'm just happy we got to bust out the Sean Markham grand slam first home run list again. That's my favorite list.
Little tease for the JS Online Brewers podcast this week. Kurt and I spent a lot of time talking about Sean Markham. For those who like to live in the past, there's a lot of Sean Markham this week, so people will appreciate that.
The unsung hero of the 2011 season gets too much crap for running out of gas.
Yes, he does, and he was way better in 2012 than people remember too. Go look at those numbers. You'll be shocked how low his ERA is in the balance for the second season he was with the Brewers. And then he was basically done. Like, he was pretty much washed at that point. But yes.
2012 is a bad time. Zach Greinke gets traded. The Brewers collapse after their 2011 season. It's a bad time. They hit a lot of homers, but other than that
bullpen, if you go and look on on Fangraphs and look at, they have a stat basically like win probability added, and you can look at the bullpens. Their bullpen was historically bad that year. That was the year that both Axford blew up, and then Jim Henderson came up and he wasn't very good. And I think K-Rod also had problems that year. And just everybody in that bullpen was terrible. And they kicked away every time they had a 1-run lead, they gave up 2 runs. And they just did it over and over and over again. Because actually that team, that rotation, that was a playoff quality, like win in the playoffs quality rotation. And they just, the bullpen completely undermined like the entire team. It was sick.
All right. I guess speaking of pitching, Lucroy's Suitcase's second question here, asking, did the pitching lab make Tehran a legitimate pitcher again, or should we expect the wheels to fall off soon? Paul's not here, but this has been confounding Paul for like 2 weeks in our group chat with me and Ryan. Obviously, probably hasn't been here long enough, JR, for the pitching lab to really do anything. But I guess, have you noticed anything that he's doing well, or is he just kind of getting the ball hit in the right spots so far?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say that there's more to it than that, and there might be. This franchise has found ways to get guys good without even the pitching lab, but just let's throw this pitch and trash this pitch, like let's just completely change your repertoire. They've worked that out before and it has been effective. And maybe that's what's going to happen here. A huge red flag when you go through a start and don't have any strikeouts. It's cool that they won on Wednesday 4-2. And it's a cool note that there were no strikeouts and no walks, but that does not play long-term. In fact, I was driving home thinking they're going to lose tomorrow, because that's not a sign of a team that's like figured it out. I mean, it's a stupid thought because obviously one game has nothing to do with the next, but it just felt like they maybe kind of got away with one there. And Craig Counsell said a couple times they just are really impressed. He knows how to pitch. He's obviously got all kinds of veteran experience. He's been an all-star a couple times, so he does have that working for him, and he's got a great defense behind him that turns almost every ground ball into an out. So you can afford to have a guy who isn't a strikeout guy. Adrian Hauser, same thing on Sunday. You can afford to have a guy who isn't missing bats, as long as there's some sort of consistency there on this team, on this Brewers team. So I could see it working for a little while. I mean, they don't need him to hopefully throw 10 starts, 12 starts. It's probably going to be less than that. So I think they have the luxury of kind of seeing where this goes. I wouldn't be altogether optimistic, but I mean, obviously 2 starts gives you reason for something.
Yeah, I think that watching that game, what I really noticed is his command was quite good for the most part. He did leave some meatballs out there, and the guys didn't hit them. And so he got lucky on that, especially with that lineup. Normally that lineup, you leave meatballs out for those guys, they are going to feast, and they didn't. So he got somewhat lucky in that, but he was also just doing a really good job of working around the edges. He was doing the thing where like he would go and he would throw a pitch like at the very bottom corner of the zone, and he'd get a strike call, and then he would come in with a pitch that was a little bit more outside and a little bit down, and the guy would go fishing for it because of course he had to. And you were like, he did that again and again and again, and I just was super impressed by that. But it's also not necessarily a sustainable thing for a guy to do, especially like you're talking about this idea that he was that he didn't get any strikeouts, and what really wasn't generating all that many whiffs. I mean, there were a few in there, but it wasn't really all that many whiffs. That's just not going to be a path to long-term success. You are going to have games where your head gets handed to you in that situation, but fortunately, he is, I think, the guy who would be the first to go, right? I think he would be the guy that when one of these other guys, when Wade Miley or Eric Lauer comes back, he's probably the first out. Or maybe they go to a 6-man rotation for a bit at that time. Who knows exactly, timing-wise how it's going to work, but I think he's the first one to go. And really, it's sort of a miracle you just got him to be good enough to keep things on the rails. And I would imagine that there was some, him working with the Brewers and talking about, what of his stuff works really well. And I think that you have to note that he was pitching on the moon in El Paso. It's one of the more hitter-friendly parks in the most hitter-friendly league in the minors. And so what he was doing there wasn't necessarily indicative of what he could potentially do. Even though it's better competition in the major leagues, it's also not, those kind of conditions. So that's something. But I would not expect anything out of him long term. Though how funny is it? You guys noticed he's only 32, right?
Yeah, somehow.
Well,
Yeah.
because I think he came up and was pitching for the Braves, like
He was 20 when he came up.
right,
I'm
and was
pretty
like
sure, right?
in their rotation and an important pitcher for them right away. And of course, this reminded me instantly of Carlos Zambrano, because that was the Zambrano career path. Was like he was great when he was like 21, and by the time he was 30, he was completely washed. So, and I think he was out of baseball by the time he was like 34. So, yeah, it very much reminded me of that career path. But yeah, he was really, really good for a long time with the Braves in the actually, a lot of it was in that interim when they had Freddie Freeman, but they weren't winning because they had decided to do a hard rebuild, and that ended up, putting together the team that won the World Series with that. So he wasted a lot of his best years on Braves teams that were going nowhere, which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I just question how sustainable this is too, because you can't really survive throwing 89, right? Anymore. And it's not like his movement is great either. I pulled up the StatCast page. He's 10th percentile in fastball velocity in those two starts and 17th percentile in fastball spin. He's basically a junk baller now. He is a 70th percentile in extension. So maybe there's some weird deception thing going on with that cross-firing that it's hard to pick up. But again, you're looking at numbers over two starts too. It just definitely feels like a hot potato situation where, okay, you got a good few starts out of him, but I think you're right that he's probably the first one to go, even before Colin Ray, when some of these guys get back. All right. Devin Bearwolf with a question here that we kind of talked about earlier, but we can address here too. He is asking, how much do you think the Brewers' struggles pitching and hitting are due to the new, more balanced scheduling MLB is doing now, instead of just letting the Brewers beat up on the dregs of the NL Central? JR, you mentioned they're actually doing pretty well outside of the division. So do you think that's not so much a factor?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's the same for everybody. And I would say it's not so much about beating up on lesser teams, but just not being able to get familiar with tendencies and stuff. You're seeing new pitchers every week. You're seeing new hitters every week. So that's just the way it goes. And maybe by the end of the year, the cream will rise to the top a little bit later than it usually does, because by then, teams will have sort of, you get to the playoffs and teams will have will be facing familiar foes at that point. I don't know. I don't think that's a big deal. I just think it's created maybe this middle class that we talk about for everybody. Everybody's kind of in the same boat. So the difference between a playoff team and a team just on the outside is going to be razor thin this year. And there are going to be games that they are going to have to steal or not, like a game out like Saturday that they easily could have lost. They're going to have to hang on to those because those are going to come in handy at the end of the year.
Yeah, I think it's very, very little as well. And this also, the people talk about beating up on the dregs of the NL Central, which was definitely true last year with three pretty bad teams that the Brewers actually didn't beat up on necessarily as much as they should have. That was part of the problem. It was, they got right around 500 with both the Pirates and the Cubs. So they didn't do as much of that as in the past. But there have also been times in 2018, 19, 20 where the NL Central was actually quite strong and quite deep. Other than the Pirates in that era, like the teams were really quite good across the board, and the Brewers still managed to do quite well. So I think this is mostly about the injuries and the underperformances more than it is about anything like that.
For sure. Kind of similar along the same lines of thinking, Adam Post asking, the Brewers don't seem to be a great team, but neither do the other teams in the NL Central. How many wins will be enough to win the division? Will finishing 500 or better be enough? JR, your thoughts on that? I know you said maybe a little bit over 500.
I mean, there is at least a possibility that a below 500 team makes the playoffs now with the way the schedule is. I don't buy it. I don't think that's how it's going to go. I think the winner of this division is going to still need 87, 88 wins. Somebody's going to get hot. It could be the Brewers. My experience in life tells me it's going to be the Cardinals. I don't necessarily see any of the other three truly having that in them, but obviously, with Pittsburgh, I don't know. Chicago at points this year looked a lot better than I would have thought. So, you're gonna need that. You to be safe, you're gonna need at least 86, 87 wins to take this division. But I'm open to the possibility that an 84 win team gets into the playoffs.
For the Brewers, I think that the number to get to win the division and feel really good about it is like 88 wins. I think that they have the highest ceiling of any team in the division. And that's mostly because they just have so many more wins banked than the Cardinals at this point. So they have a higher ceiling than the Cardinals because of that. And I think they have a better roster too because of the Cardinals pitching is just so bad. Like really, really bad. But
it is bad.
So I think that from their perspective, like get to 88 wins. Now, I don't know if 88 wins necessarily wins it for, say, the Pirates or the Cardinals, because I think the Brewers could, if things come together for the Brewers, they can go into the 90s. So I think, but for the Brewers, I think given how poor the rest of the division is, I think 88, and I'd be willing to take that to the bank that they probably win the division at 88.
I think too, if you get to 88, you are threatening for a wild card spot. It doesn't even have to be the division.
Right.
So, I mean, obviously it's preferable to win the division, but you know, once you're in that territory, you are competing with a lot of other teams.
That is true.
Yeah, especially with that third wild card spot for sure. All right, My Only Lemonade asking, in Saturday's post-game interview, Craig Counsell seemed defensive about this recent run of stolen bases allowed to the Reds. Yes, they won both games, but yikes. Did the Reds discover a weakness we should be worried about? I will say it's worth noting the Reds have been a good base running team this year. Heading into Sunday, they're third in all of baseball in steals, although admittedly the last weekend helped them climb quite a bit there, but they're also fourth in base running runs. So Ryan, is this more just a good base running team finding something, whether it's stealing out a pitcher or finding something with Contreras, or are you worried, I guess, about mitigating the running game going forward?
I mean, it is more of a concern this year than it has been in the past, but I don't think overall, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I don't believe the Brewers have been particularly terrible at allowing stolen bases. And I think that the Reds are a team that can do this to you, and they were clearly keyed up and amped up to do it. And so I think I'm going to need to see a lot more of this before I really start to get concerned. And even then, if you're making pitches, if your pitchers are making their pitches, the stolen base thing can only kind of hurt you so much. It's not a huge concern. It's always sort of been overbaked. And if you're getting even if you're grabbing a quarter of the base runners that are stealing, you're generating a lot of extra outs there too. So you don't have to catch that many people before the numbers on it, the raw math of it, starts to work in your favor. And then the calculus on it sort of changes at that point.
Yeah, I think the Friday game was a bigger deal, I think, than Saturday, even though the numbers were higher on Saturday. You know, there were two pitchers, Colin Ray and McGill, who were on the mound for all of them. There was a big lead involved. You can understand why pitchers are going to be less attentive to base runners at that point, because it is about making their pitches. I would say Friday there were a couple steals that really upped the Reds' chances, I think, and that one was a little frustrating. Obviously, the Brewers, you know, they're going to be content having a guy who's much more focused on framing and a little less concerned with the base running game. Obviously every team's running more. I'm kind of surprised the Brewers haven't done it more. They did it a fair amount this weekend too, but you know, given the speed that they have, I'm kind of surprised we haven't seen it all the time. Reds are using the assets they have. They don't have a fearsome lineup, but they got guys who can get on base and steal, and that's what they should be doing. So I think it's if there's a chance it becomes a trend, becomes a concern, but a couple games I'm not there yet.
For sure. All right, let's talk some pitching. Made Wiley asking, should we be worried about Freddie and Corbin's regression, or encouraged that they should improve at the right time this year? So, JR, some glass half full stuff there. What do you think?
I mean, that's kind of what I said earlier. Like, I think that's in my mind, and I could be convinced otherwise, but in my mind, that's the biggest story. These guys have to be special if the team wants to do special things. And Corbin's track record now is getting up there in just not being that dominant level pitcher. But I think it was Ryan. I think you said, try to find a pitcher who's had 4 great dominant years in a row. It's scarce, like, I don't even know if this is, if we should even blame him. He's gone from truly, truly top tier elite to good enough. Like, I mean, it's hardly a criticism. It's just that was something that separated the Brewers in the past. Woodruff's got to be healthy. Peralta still has room to really, really grow here. That's the that's the concern, is that he just there are times he's not competitive. He had, I think, a pretty nice outing this week. He had a rough first inning, but gave up kind of a laser beam home run down the opposite field line, which probably won't happen again. And then he had 5 bagels after that. So that's a little encouraging. He just hasn't been on his game. And yeah, I mean, but bottom line, I don't think this team is a true contender unless those guys are right.
Yeah, I would say that really, if you take out that game where he gave up all those runs after he watched his friend get like maimed in the dugout and clearly just was out of sorts after that in that inning. I went back and I watched the replay of it later that night because I wanted to see what exactly happened. And it was like really, really a rough thing. Like, I don't think you can hold that against him at all. Basically, at that point, I think Burns has a 3.75 ERA. Peralta has a 4.62 ERA, and it's probably about even. Maybe Peralta's a little bit higher if you take out that game, because I don't think you can read anything into that game. I think that's one of those where you just have to, like, and Counsell said it, like, you just have to forget that game and just write it off and be done with it, because it's terrible. But yeah, what separates this team, what gives them the chance, is if you have a healthy and good Burns, Woodruff, Peralta going into the postseason, that is something for other teams to really contend with. If they can go in and shut you down, that's how the Brewers, that is their path at this moment to potentially winning a World Series. That is how it can happen. If they're going to do it, that it's going to almost certainly look like that. And that will change. Things change. Like, new guys come in and that all shifts, but that's the path right now. And so far, obviously, we haven't seen it because Burns and Peralta have been mediocre and Woodruff's been hurt.
I think with Burns especially too, the frustrating thing is, like, you still see the flashes and he's just a hair off. And JR, I know Kurt wrote about Corbin after his last start, and like the confounding thing is nobody seems to know exactly what the issue is. You know, like he said, you know, well, it's the walks to lead off an inning or the early count stuff, and then he settles in. But I guess on one hand, that's the frustrating part, but on the other, it seems like an easy thing to maybe fix or just regress, and maybe then they're golden. But it's just tricky.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's been a long time now. But yeah, there's some mystery there. His stuff is still great. His his location is still good. I think he's walking a few more guys maybe, and that certainly has bitten him. You know, he was in God tier, not walking guys for a little while there. He's not that anymore. And then maybe it's just too many cutters, but like that formula has worked for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know. I would be skeptical that like really, really great Corbin Burns is going to show up again this year, but it's possible, certainly. And then, and like Freddie, yes, that one start is an issue. He's had struggles all year. Like, it's not just that one start, but that certainly inflated numbers that were already a little bit bigger than usual and turned them into gaudy numbers. So that is worth noting as well. Yes.
All right. Speaking of pitching, again, we mentioned Adrian Hauser, a bit of an up and down week. So a question here from Prime Colin Ray asking, Adrian Hauser had a bad start versus Toronto and a very good start versus Cincinnati this week. In Toronto, he had a 52% ground ball percentage and a 524 BABIP. How much generally are ground ball pitchers just praying that the ball goes in a favorable direction, or is there something more tangible that went better in Cincinnati? I kind of mentioned it before, Ryan, but like, such is life as a pitch to contact, I should say, a ground ball pitcher, right? You're taking the ball out of your hands and kind of letting the ball fall where it may.
Yeah, there is really a lot of that with those guys. And you do generally, if you have a good defense behind you, especially a good infield defense that does a good job of converting ground balls into outs, that's really what you want. But there are some differences. I mean, he was giving up some hard contact grounders to Toronto in a way that yesterday against Cincinnati on Saturday he wasn't, and guys were pounding the ball. Or sorry, I guess it was Sunday against Cincinnati. Guys were pounding the ball into the ground a little bit more, and the contact wasn't quite as hard, and the launch angles were probably better for him. They were more negative, so that. There are some subtle differences there, but yeah, a lot of it just is like sometimes the balls dribble through and sometimes they don't. And So you just have to sort of be ready to deal with that and live with it. And sometimes your defenders make a really nice play and you end up with a double play and you're out of the inning. And sometimes they botch it, and instead of having 2 outs, you have no outs and an extra base runner, and then things get really bad for you in a hurry, which is the kind of thing that we saw against Toronto on multiple occasions. So a lot of it is just the guy really hoping. But at least this year, we know that they have the good defense behind him to be able to convert those ground balls into outs. And so he's being set up to have much more success this year than maybe he was last year. So he has that going for him. So it's not all luck, but there's quite a bit, especially on a start-to-start basis. There's a lot of, just luck involved here.
And he didn't have his best defense behind him. Obviously, Adames didn't go to the trip on the trip. Turang did not start that game. He came off the bench. So Monasterio is your shortstop, and you had Mike Brasso at first base. Like I mean, that may not have had any. It may not have mattered one bit, but it certainly isn't necessarily what you want if you're going to be throwing a ground ball pitcher out there. And the Blue Jays put the ball in play a lot and usually hit it pretty hard. So I think it was just a one-off. I think you can look at some of the soft contact and think it's just a one-off, and then maybe he backed it up on Sunday. That was kind of nice.
Next question this week comes from PJ Wessels asking one game against the Reds, Orioles, and Athletics coming this week. Over under 4.5 wins. Also, what song, album, or artist would you say best fits the mood or vibes of this Brewers season so far? JR, I guess let's start with the numbers. Over under 4.5 wins. The O's are really, really good. So that's a problem.
Yeah, I never assume a winning week. So, or especially a 5-2 week, I should say. I think you could assume a winning. You could go 4-3. I go under.
Sure.
Like you said, the O's are good. Gosh, the A's. It would just be like the Brewers to lose 2 of 3, to sweep the Reds, come in and like take 1 or 2 or 3 from Baltimore, and then lose 2 or 3 from Oakland. I could totally see that happening. I take the under, but maybe I'm just a pessimist. They should start winning. I mean, even these teams that they're playing upcoming, they're not as they've been playing well lately, but the Brewers should be able to make some hay in June for sure.
Yeah, they do have some tougher teams coming up, and it's weird. It's a bunch of guys because after this, it's the Twins, who I think were kind of considered contenders for the division, but they are out in front in the division there. And then it's the Diamondbacks and Pirates, or Pirates and Diamondbacks, which like before the season started, that would have looked a lot softer than what it looks like right now. Those two teams are considerably better, especially offensively, which is what I want to talk about with the Orioles here, because the Orioles, you could still get at their pitching. Their pitching is not great. But man, that offense, if they get going on you, there will probably be a game in this series where they put up double-digit runs, given that it's, the park that the Brewers play in and that how home run friendly it is. And that team is a power hitting machine. And so there will probably be a game where they get lit up. You don't know when it's coming, but it will probably happen just because that's how the Orioles roll. They're putting hurting on really good teams out in the East sort of on a consistent basis right now. So I think you have to be sort of ready for that, steel yourself for it, but you can get at their pitching. So I think we're going to see at least one slugfest where the Brewers, end up, it's like 8-6 or something, and we'll see who ends up coming out ahead. But that one's going to be a big offensive series. And then, you do just hope that you can like put away the Athletics. And so it would be very Brewers to do that, to stumble in that series, but they did summarily take care of the Royals at home a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So like that gives you hope that you could just go through and take care of that. But yeah, the A's they're on a historic pace right now. They might challenge the 62 Mets. I mean, hell, they might challenge the 99 Cleveland Spiders right now, the way it's going. So
the 1899 Cleveland Spiders.
Yes, the 1899 Cleveland Spiders, which was the all-time worst baseball team ever. So, but do you have a good answer for this, JR? For the song? Okay.
Most important part of the question here. What's the song or album or vibe that would best describe this team, JR?
Yeah, I wish I had prepared for this because I think I could have come up with a good answer. In absence of that, I simply can't. I'll go with Devin Williams' walk-up song "Ready" by Lil Baby. I know very little about that song, but I will trust Devin Williams. He's the best player on this team and has saved their butts in a couple moments this year. Even when he doesn't at his best, he has held on for dear life. He did that this week too. So I think that's just the best I can do on short notice. I apologize. I feel like I could come up with a much better song, but I got nothing.
We're gonna go with the Johnny Cash version of "Hurt."
Wow.
Oh God,
That's dark.
That's the Oakland
That's dark.
A's song. My God,
That is, but it is. You
See
know,
if I still feel.
yeah, it doesn't. Well, but the thing is, it doesn't really fit because they're still good. Like they're actually managing to play good baseball despite it all. But it's just every single thing. It just the injuries just day after day after day. Today, or was it yesterday? I'm like, wait. Perkins is back on this team. What happened? And somebody's like, oh yeah, Tyrone Taylor's hurt now. And it's just like everybody just keeps getting hurt and kicked out of the lineup. And it's just like a slog on a day-to-day basis. And the only thing keeping like the spirits afloat is the fact that they've somehow managed to keep winning some games and stay, in the lead in the division. But yeah, it is dark, and it is. I was trying to find something that was a little bit more manic, and I couldn't think of it off the top of my head. Like something that represented a little bit more like there's a lot of pain and whatever. There's probably something by the Velvet Underground that would fit here. I can't think of it off the top of my head. What would work for it?
we're missing an obvious one, "The Freshman" by the Verve Pipe, because
Sure.
it's kind of a depressing song, but also it also happens to be one of my favorite songs of all time. So I can't really, I don't feel depressed when I hear it. And obviously, the freshmen, for good and bad, are kind of the theme here. Sometimes it's not even just the rookies that they highlighted at the beginning of the year with the freshman video series. It's just a bunch of new faces, people you did not know you were going to have to count on, who have been sort of filling some voids this year. So I think that's got to be the one.
I'll go with it because it's better
Yeah.
than anything I could come up with.
Yeah. Well, I just returned from the Taylor Swift concert in Chicago. Went to see her on Friday night. So I've got some Taylor Swift songs maybe that could help describe.
What do you got, James?
First of all, we have "Cruel Summer," because obviously the injuries have been cruel. There is "'Tis the Damn Season." I just feel like that's a vibe. It's off Evermore, kind of more of a low key, more depressing vibe. Plus, every time somebody gets hurt, I feel like, well, of course, 'tis the damn season for somebody to get hurt, right? Maybe "Delicate," because everybody's hurt again.
That's
Don't
good.
blame
That's
me.
good.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
Come as my boyfriend.
Yeah, there you go. If things go really well, maybe they could have champagne problems at the end of the year. So there's that. I don't know, man. She played for 3.5 hours. It was a giant set list. But great
She
show.
was out there
Forget
for
my
3.5 hours. Like her.
Oh, yes. Just her.
Okay.
Yes.
I have incredible respect for that. That's
Yes.
some Bruce Springsteen Born in the USA tour stuff where he was routinely out there for like 4 hours every night, playing
Yes.
for like huge stadiums and having to like project that kind of energy for a stadium crowd for like 3+ hours every night. Props to her. Like, wow,
Yeah.
way to go.
Yeah, and you know what? The boss is not trying to change into a different dress under the stage in the dark in like 30 seconds between sets. So, it was great. It was a lot of
Forgive
fun.
my
Good time.
naivete. Is "Cruel Summer," because I'm sorry, I'm not a Taylor Swift person. I apologize. Is "Cruel Summer" the cover of the Bananarama song, or is that like a whole separate thing?
No, whole separate thing.
Whole separate thing. Okay,
Whole separate thing.
that's fine.
Also, there was no set break.
There's like little video interstitials in between like the different quote unquote eras, right? So if she's switching albums, that's when she'd duck under the stage, change outfits, they'd come and reset things. So, but those were like 30-45 second little interstitials and video packages.
Okay, so it was like
a
a straight run of a set. Oh, wow, I'm blown away by that. That's it. She's doing it night after night after night in these huge stadiums,
dancing, choreography. It was great.
Yeah, that's pretty kick ass. Like I have I've become a Taylor
Go
Swift
ahead.
appreciator, not so much because of the music, which is fine. Like, I don't have anything against the music. It's fine. But I've become an appreciator because, like, now she's going to war with Ticketmaster because of what happened with this tour. And so, like, huge thumbs up. And the fact that she's doing that night in, night out on a big tour like this, I am floored and blown away and super impressed.
Did she play any covers like Cruel Summer?
No covers. All right.
Too many songs.
Too many songs already, and at least half a dozen that were left off that should have been played, according to sources close to me. All right. Brad Westness asking, please rank the following injuries in order of how embarrassing they would be to explain to friends and family. 1, Lucroy's suitcase. Another one, Scooter Jeanette's bathroom shower rack. Darren Ruff's tarpaulin. Feel free to make any additional nominations. So I guess, JR, do you have a list of most embarrassing Brewers injuries at the ready here?
I don't, but I do have one that will rise to the top here, and that's Matt Wise and the salad tongs.
Yes, absolutely.
Relief pitcher, changeup specialist cut his middle finger on his pitching hand with a pair of salad tongs. Tough be it for my guy Matt Wise, who's now the pitching coach of the Angels, I believe, right? He's got a pretty prominent role. Good for him.
Interesting.
Did not know that until the Angels came to town. So that's a tough one. Lucroy suitcase is like part of the problem with the injuries is that you never really know exactly what happened.
Yeah,
so
but we kind of know on that one, JR.
Yeah, so I don't know. Like that one isn't embarrassing because it isn't, canonically we don't know how real that is.
You can definitely get a boxer's fracture from a falling suitcase. Come on.
Of course you can. So I'm gonna go with salad tongs, Scooter. I mean, Darren Ruff, like that wasn't embarrassing. That was just awful. Like that tarp has metal underneath that. I mean, he was trying to make a play, and it like it's part of every ballpark, but it's still very difficult to navigate around. And I feel for the guy. That one wasn't embarrassing as much as it was just terrible luck, terrible freak accident. I mean, that's like we talked about at the outset. How many freak injuries is this team gonna have to endure this year?
So I will say this. Don't have sharp edges near the playing surface where you have athletes who make millions of dollars playing the game. Like, just take the sharp edges off. Like,
why is it sharp?
Parents,
it's a tarp.
Parents at home go through and baby-proof their homes so that their children don't hurt themselves. Like
Darren Ruff
baby-proof your
the
damn
tarp.
field, Reds. Like, this is unacceptable that they let that happen. Like, that is a poverty franchise, and it is run absolutely terribly from the top down. The fish is rotting from the head on this one, and like it is absolutely like. How do you have a sharp edge that can like tear up a guy's knee sitting right there in the field of play? I'm like kind of joking, but I'm mostly not joking here. Like that shouldn't happen. Like that is gross negligence on their parts. And like Darren Ruff should sue their ass because like there's no reason that should happen. You like how hard is it to put a rubberized edge around the thing or something? Do something. It's stupid and it's wrong. And to answer the actual question though, I have to say that like the one that like when you talk about embarrassing injuries, it really begins and ends with Devin Williams. Because remember that press conference when David Stearns made him go sit next to him and sit there and talk to him? Jerry, you may have even been there.
Explain what you did.
Yeah, basically
it was like a dad with the kid who was misbehaving. It was horrible.
Yep, it was the dad taking the kid back to the house that he had just like egged and making them like go clean it up and like apologize to the people. It was that level of embarrassing and like just hardcore. So that one, like I think it begins and ends there because that was humiliating for him to have to go through because it was such a stupid thing to have done at the worst possible time.
Yeah, at least they were open about him punching a wall, unlike some other people. All right, a couple more questions here. Michael McNamara asking a question here. JR, actually, I have a story pitch for you, or Michael does.
Okay.
Did you know that Owen Miller's from the Milwaukee area?
Yeah, I believe I've heard something about that. I mentioned that to him. I had him on our podcast last week, and I started with, by the way, Owen Miller, do you know that you're from Fredonia? And he did not laugh.
Oh no.
And I don't like I was prepared for that in case he didn't laugh. I felt like it was just a fine transition out. That's totally fine. But I wasn't sure like if he had understood that was kind of a meme at this point. Probably he does. I don't know. And he may not have even, who knows? He may not have even heard me, right? Like I just I am actually getting sick of the meme, but yeah, I had a conversation on one of my earlier podcasts that I'll bring to this one as well, because this is something I run into is what are we supposed to mean when we say somebody is native to a certain place? And I asked that in the context of Owen Miller because there's a few different cities getting floated around. You know, he lived in Fredonia, but he was born in Mequon, and those are not far apart from each other, but those are not the same place. So where is he native to? And I also asked this for myself because I was someone who was born in the state of Pennsylvania, but have lived my entire life, barring 6 months and a couple years in college, in the state of Wisconsin. So am I a Wisconsin native or am I a Pennsylvania native, a place that I could not even get to without Google Maps? So I pose that to you. What do you guys think about that?
Well, this is like the Hank Hill situation where he was actually born in New York and they hid it from him his entire life until he actually had to go look at his birth certificate and found out he was actually born in New York.
New York.
Well, and that was because, Cotton was going to try to kill Castro at Yankee Stadium. So I love that one. So anyway, this one gets me because, and I'm going to be very self-centered about this. I'm pretty sure I'm the first person to make the joke because it was like a half hour after when everybody was just posting, like my timeline on Twitter after he was signed was just do. And I'm like, does anybody know where Owen Miller is from? And like, it was probably like 20 minutes after the signing had been announced. And so
this is just like when Matub on Reporting is Eligible felt that winning fixes everything came from the book Collision Low Crossers. I guarantee somebody else made that joke. Just saying, continue.
Yep. No, this is definitely that. I want to trademark this and have it on my list of things along with Craig Tember as things that like I get credit for.
Oh yeah. Man, we'd make so much money on t-shirts if we actually trade
t-shirts. Yes. The t-shirt concession would be crazy. So anyway, yes, it is funny though. Well, yeah, like where were you born? Because like the hospital is generally not in the suburb. The hospital is generally in the city, and so you have to go to the city and be born. But you like my parents, I was born in Madison. My parents took me home to Madison. But like my siblings were all born in Madison, then taken home to Middleton. So yeah. That whole thing is just
JJ Watt, a Waukesha native, born in a hospital in Waukesha, but JJ Watt will never be associated with Waukesha.
Right.
No.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No. That's a good question. I was born in Fort Atkinson, but moved to the La Crosse area when I was like 3. Grew up there. Still kind of identify as a Western Wisconsinite. So I don't know. That's a great question. I guess it's whatever fits your narrative as the media, JR.
Absolutely. That's what I wanted to hear, guys. Thank you. Thank you for permission.
All right. Morgoth 10, our last Patreon question this week before we get to a couple Twitter questions, asking which Milwaukee Brewer has most in common with a potato. Any variety is fine, though I've been enjoying my Yukon Golds lately. So, JR, who's the most potato-like Milwaukee
Fortunately,
Brewer?
I have given this one some thought, and I still don't have a great answer. I ultimately decided to go with Brian Anderson for a couple of reasons. One, he has big eyes, which you see on the scoreboard. That does fit with a potato. Also, if you're thinking like a potato is an interesting combination as a versatile dish, which is nonetheless not very exciting. It can be thought of as kind of boring. No one looks forward to the potatoes for dinner that night, but it is a versatile thing. You could have mashed, you could have loaded, you could have just a plain old-fashioned potato. Brian Anderson can play multiple positions. He's very effective at both of those things. I would not say that his numbers are sexy offensively. He's not somebody that you think of as a difference maker. He's not a masher, which is a problem here, but we'll just say that he's got the variety without the pizzazz, and he's got big eyes. We're going with Brian Anderson.
Yeah, I actually read this question differently. I don't know. I didn't read it closely enough. And I was looking at like trying to compare he has asked us in the past, like to match up item with, so like match a different type of potato with a different player on the team. And
oh no.
Yeah, so we're working on this, and I was like, okay, definitely 100% Christian Yelich is the sweet potato, because sweet potatoes are the things that people eat when they're like not doing like a carbless diet. And if you've ever seen Christian Yelich's photos from the Body magazine, the man has never had a carbohydrate in his entire life. So like that's just like, for that matchup is perfect. I don't know about the rest of them. Like the baby reds, who's tiny, like a baby red potato, like. It wasn't even the question anyway, so we're just not even going to bother with that. Let's go to the Twitter questions and get out of here.
All right, yeah. We've kept JR way too long already. Here's some Twitter questions. Vinny Cornell's asking, I'm sure I won't be the only one to ask this, but where the hell did Monasterio come from, and why will he be the catalyst to save the season? Full disclosure, I haven't seen him play, but the radio loves him. So we kind of talked about that, right? Minor league free agent signing. Actually signed out of Venezuela with the Cubs, I believe it looks like. Bounced around a little bit. Was a player to be named later a time or two. And yeah, just kind of hung around and got a shot there. All right, next Twitter question. Our friend Jonathan Judge. Question for the show. How's JR's internet doing? Still here,
dumb.
baby.
Yeah, I mean, it's worked out so far tonight. We've had really good success tonight. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling like Joey Weimer after last week of baseball, that maybe we've turned a corner.
There we go. There we go. Hopefully no strikeouts coming. We'll try to wrap this up. My name is Matt, but you can call me Matub, at Call Me Matub on Twitter, asking, why didn't you guys invite Matub? I heard he baseballs now. JR, we got Matub into baseball. He understands things now. It's kind of scary.
He went full Neo in the Matrix, where he just plugged a cord into his brain, intent on learning Kung Fu, and baseball came with it. And he asks such good questions. I have to give him credit, because Matub is, I mean, if you know him, he's kind of an idiot, but he asks such good questions. He learned so much. He has gone headfirst into the video game aspect, and he's like learning all the players, and like knows things about like Giants reliever Tyler Rogers, like things that just he really took it upon himself to learn baseball. So you absolutely should have him on next, is the moral of that story. He'll talk about the memes, he'll talk about his tweets, and he'll talk about baseball ad nauseum. It's pretty great.
And how Fart McDuty is doing en road to the show.
Everything has a price. Everything has a price. And if you want Matub, there is a price.
All right. That'll do it for questions. I think that's a good note to end on for sure. Matub, come on. We'll chat. Reminder, patrons get question priority, patreon.com/MKE tailgates. You also get a shout out when you sign up to become a new patron. Even if you're not a patron, though, you can support us. Go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening to us right now. Hit follow, subscribe, whatever that button says, and leave a 5-star review. And if you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Paul will read it when he's back.
And we also have a new patron to shout out here. I didn't put it in the rundown. I missed it. But we do have Prime Colin Ray, and who actually asked a question here. So welcome to Prime Colin Ray, and thank you for supporting the podcast. We do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. And JR, thanks again for stepping in. I guess we'll do the Paul thing too. Do you have anything to plug? Anything coming up online this week?
Oh man, I never have a good answer to that, because usually what I do is sort of like fly by the seat of my pants. So
Sure.
if anybody, yes, jsonline.com is where you'll find it all. Kurt Hogue, Todd Rosiak. I'm actually going to be covering a game this week on Friday, so you can look forward to that. The A's opener. Hopefully you can catch up with Esteury Ruiz or Lucas Erceg. There's a few storylines there. Jace Peterson will be back in town, so hoping that works out. And just jsonline.com/deal if you're looking for a digital subscription. There's always good deals there on that page, so check it out. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think I just re-upped my subscription personally, because it's like 99 cents for the first 3 months there. So
yeah, buddy,
that'll get you through baseball season right there, pretty much. So
sure will.
Good deal. All right. Thanks again, JR. Thank you again, everybody, for listening. That'll do it for this week. We will be back here next time to talk about those O's and the A's series as well. So stick around. We'll see you here next week on Milwaukee's Tailgate.